Hello and welcome back to the Live Reality Game Podcast. My name is Steven Stewart, and I'm thrilled to be here today for more Surviving Reelfoot First Fire coverage. And join us today to tell us all about her game and her experience. We have Jessica. Jessica, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm a little surprised, Jessica. There's no hat.
I know, I did. I should have pulled out the hat. I am known for my hats, but it's a little warm here. I just got back from vacation in Ireland. It was much cooler there, and I'm readjusting to the Virginia heat, and I just could not put like another piece of clothing on my body today.
Talk to me. I'm just going to get to the front part. Talk about the decision of what hat do you wear to a Survivor game? Because I know you played Outlast, you wore a hat. Reelfoot, you're wearing a hat. How do you talk about the wardrobe decision?
For me, it was mostly about trying to like shield myself from the sun so I don't fry. And especially with Reelfoot, they said no sunglasses, and I have light blue eyes, and I was like, okay, I definitely need something to shield myself from the sun. And the hat that I brought for Reelfoot, it also was supposed to be like SPF, and it was waterproof, and so I was like, it was going to be like multifunctional, and it did all those things. It blocked the sun for me, and when it rained, it blocked the rain for me, and it lets me accessorize too.
So the hat was a success.
It was. It worked.
So I want to go back a little bit. So in 2024, I believe you play Outlast. Was that your first game ever?
It was my first game ever, yes.
And so talk to me about the decision from playing Outlast. Now, I haven't seen your full season. I've only seen up to the merge, so please no spoilers. But talk to me about going from Outlast to deciding to apply for Reelfoot.
Literally as soon as Outlast wrapped and we were at like the finale party, I said, okay, guys, I've drank the Kool-Aid. Like, what is the next LRG that I can sign up for? Like, I need to be in the wilderness without my phone. I had played lots and lots of ORGs online and helped produce Expedition Online. So this was like kind of the next step for me. And I was like, okay, get me off my computer, get me in the wilderness. And so many people that I talked to recommended Reelfoot, and they're like, it's the real deal. The Reelfoot, that is, got to be punny. And I said, okay, if that's going to be like the most intense one, sign me up. And I went through the interview process, and I guess they liked me. So it was awesome.
Now, Outlast is a challenging game element-wise. Reelfoot is a longer game than that. So once you get cast, what do you do to prepare for Reelfoot?
Honestly, I wish I had prepared a little bit more physically, in terms of like getting a little bit better shape, because I came so close to some of those immunity.
Well, I mean, how do you prep for an eating challenge, right?
You can't really prepare for an eating challenge. That's just, being okay with not being grossed out by anything. But like being a mom of 4, being an elementary school teacher, it takes a lot to gross me out. I see a lot of gross things. I have 3 boys at home that are gross. I don't know. It takes a lot to gross me out. Something I did do for Reelfoot much better than I did for Outlast was planned my clothing a lot better. I was very intentional with making sure that I had warmer clothes, because even though, Outlast is up here in Massachusetts and Reelfoot's down here in Tennessee, I know that no matter what, those nights feel cold, and I did not sleep at all in Outlast. So going into Reelfoot, I'm like, I have to be able to sleep. So I was much more intentional with what I packed in terms of clothing. I was much warmer at night, and then I actually got to sleep, which was huge.
I'm curious, what was your family and friends' reaction to you playing Outlast and then saying, I'm going to go right back in and do an even harder one after this?
Most of them think that I'm crazy. I tell them it's type 2 fun. It's not for everybody, but everybody in my life knows that I'm obsessed with Survivor, and they've heard a lot about, my online game escapades, so they
Mhm.
know that, these social strategy games are right up my alley. So they're like, that sounds like it's perfect for you. Not for me, but for you. And I was like, absolutely. So they fully support it. My friends, want to have watch parties, and like I it's been pretty cool. My daughter is my Survivor comrade, so she was pretty into it. But everybody else is just like, you're kind of crazy, but have fun with it.
You have some fans already in the chat. Lee Farrell giving a shout out to you.
Haley.
So you don't really do much on the physical side, but you are well prepared on the wardrobe side. I'm thinking strategy wise, what did you want to come in and maybe do differently from Outlast?
That's another place where I really I feel like I really stepped up my game. Uh,
Hey Jess, it seems like it's frozen for a second.
all right, you got me.
Okay, you're back.
I'm back.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about
So
that.
you were saying strategically you stepped up your game.
Yeah, I definitely stepped up my game this time. In Outlast, I feel like I put a lot of barriers up for myself, that I don't know why, because it I never let it get in my way in online games. But I guess like being physically in person, I was like, oh, they're gonna see that like I'm older. They're gonna see that I'm, not necessarily like the most fit person, but I have, a skill set that's really good for a lot of these crazy challenges. So I said, I'm not going to worry about if I'm older than people. I'm not going to worry about if I'm like less fit than people. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to make those alliances that are going to hold strong and carry me further in the game. And that's exactly what I did. In Outlast, I never made a formal alliance. I never had a number one. And within like 5 minutes of Reelfoot, Allison and I had linked up, and by the end of day one, we had our core four with Chad and Allie, and that proved to be very beneficial for me, and in the long run of the game.
Especially because, like you will talk about as well, you will get targeted a lot in the pre-merge as a result of a lot of things. So game day arrives, you fly to Tennessee. Do you drive? Do you get picked up in a shuttle? Who are you in your lockdown room?
So I got picked up from the airport by Pete, and I got to learn all about Pete's game and Pete's life. And he's just like one of the coolest humans that I've ever met. And I was in the car with Chad, Nina, and Janai. And from the minute that Chad got in the car, he just had this kind of familiar face to me, this familiar look to me. It turns out I don't know him from anywhere, but he just had this familiarity to me. So right away I kind of had a good vibe. And Pete was awesome. He took us to Cracker Barrel, and we were just, he said, you guys can't talk about your personal lives, but you can just, chit chat. We talked a lot about food, and like, we were like, oh, this would be great to
Even
see as a
before the game, you're talking about food.
we were. And we're like, are we setting ourselves up for disaster here that we're talking about food? But there's not, a whole lot that you can talk about without giving away, personal details. And I don't know, I just got a positive vibe from Chad from the start. So whenever I saw him on my starting tribe, I was like, oh, cool. And he was like, oh, yeah, this is the Cracker Barrel Alliance. And I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. So that was awesome. In my sequester room, there was Colby and Trav, which was interesting because I, had played Outlast with Trav. So seeing, a familiar face right there in my sequester room was interesting. Funny thing was, Trav had gone by Josh, which is his first name, uh, in Outlast. So he was like holding up his name tag to me to say, like, to show me, like, oh, I'm going by Trav, which is something that I knew that he had wanted to kind of like go by that name going forward in the community. So I like shook my head at him and I was like, okay. And Colby was just having, like the young energy in the sequester room and everything. So I was just kind of observing everything that they were doing.
Jay West is also here and ready and excited about his favorite lines in the game. So I'm sure we'll talk much more about his favorite foursome.
Oh my word.
So the game begins, you're placed on the Nada tribe, and you already talked about how you recognize Trav or Josh from your Outlast season. You start in opposite tribes in that. You start in a different tribe this season, have an encounter, come pre-merge. I don't know how it goes down post-merge, but is there anyone else you recognize or notice when you see the whole cast unveiled?
Then of course over on the purple tribe there was also Lachey, and Lachey and I had some history in Outlast in terms of she gifted me an idol. We both played idols and kept ourselves safe. And then in the next tribal, I had to vote her out, which broke my heart. And, if you've watched that episode, you see me crying my eyes out because it did absolutely break my heart to vote her out. But so seeing her in this game, I was like, oh gosh, I'm kind of glad that she's starting out on the other tribe, because is she going to want to come, and get some sort of like payback or revenge for me having to vote her out? But like, thankfully, talking to her, like there were no hard feelings. She understood everything, but you never know how that's going to play out in the game. And then also there was Allison, who did not play my season of Outlast, but is part of the Outlast family. She was on production for my season of Outlast. So as soon as I saw her, I was like, girl, you and I, we're doing this thing number ones to the end. And she was like, heck yeah. So as she, out of all of her number ones, I was her number ones. I was the first one.
You now? Because that feels like a spot a lot of people were competing for, to be the number one.
Right?
So you have this long opening challenge. How was that as a start for the game to you?
I am not a runner. I can walk till the cows come home. I can do a lot of things. So I'm not a runner. But, thankfully we had Deb, or Bra, as we like to call her. And I could kind of be like, oh yeah, I'm going to hang back here with Deb so she's not by herself. And I think there were some other people who kind of had that same strategy and feeling, and it worked out that, we weren't having to like kill ourselves sprinting. Because I was like, oh, well, I can't leave Bra by herself. And that was a long, hard challenge for a chair and a hammock. So I'm not heartbroken that we didn't win, because we eventually ended up with those comfort items in the end, or later on in the game, because of,
you stole all back.
Camp raids. Yeah, we stole them. So I was like, wow, that was a lot for a chair and a hammock.
So you arrive at your campsite. How are those opening hours in the game for you?
Oh, those opening hours were so much fun. Anada was definitely like the good vibes tribe. Yay, Anada. Got to bring out my Anada buff here. We were the good vibes tribe, like from the start. We were just having fun. Everybody was really like getting along. It's so hard to have a group of, like 9 people, and there was nobody that I was like, oh yeah, we got to get this person out. So that, made it hard later down the line, but it was great for those initial, setting up camp. We worked together really well, and it was a lot of fun.
So you mentioned earlier that, off the bat, you have some pretty good conversations with Allison and Locke coming in. Talking about Chad and Aliana, how are those connections? How do those form?
So like I said, I kind of touched base with Chad and we were like, hey, you know, Cracker Barrel Alliance, because we had been in the car together on the way there. And we just, you know, felt good with each other. And it was like, we didn't have to say a whole lot. And then Allie, I just felt like she was great. She was giving off, you know, good energy, somebody who seemed like she was going to be really strategic. And I'm not really sure how we all came together as a four. I think like Alex and I were just like, hey, we need to like get some numbers together. And I was like, I feel good about Chad. And she was like, I feel good about Allie. And we just said, okay, let's get this four together. And obviously in a tribe of 9, we were like, okay, we know that we need a fifth. And it kind of turned into like whomever was kind of standing around with us, it would be like, oh yeah, the 5 of us. Oh yeah, the 5. We said that, you know, when we had Juan around with us. We said that when we had Jay West around with us. We said that when we had Deb around with us. And it would just be like, we were just trying to say like, okay, whoever's here, to kind of make everybody feel like, oh, they're good with us. The only one who that didn't ever really happen with was Colby. And Colby was just so entranced by that codex thing. Sorry, my computer's
let's talk about that
okay,
cryptex, right? You arrive at camp. There's a cryptex in the fire pit. Kobe kind of gets to it first. What was your thoughts about the cryptex, and did you want to open it?
I was kind of towards the back of the group when we walked into camp. So by the time, you know, I actually made it up to where the fire pit was, you know, Colby already had it in his hand. And I was like, have at it, buddy. I have no desire to have any parts of a public advantage. Like, no thanks. So I was happy to, you know, just stand back and let him dig his own grave. And with that, which, you know, good for him. And it turned out to be much more of a problem than I anticipated. For him, it really painted a much bigger target than I ever imagined. So I'm glad that I didn't really have anything to do with it. And I occasionally, once in a while, would be like, oh, let me try a word just to kind of get a look at it and to try to like finagle with it and see if I could see if there was anything inside. And I wasn't having any luck. I honestly didn't see any of the letters until other people pointed them out to me. So I was just guessing words that I thought might have to do with, you know, the theme of First Fire or, you know, anything, you know, Surviving Reelfoot related. I wasn't having any luck. And I was like, you know, I'm going to let you do that.
Were you wanting to target Kobe about over this, or you're just like, you're neutral, but if other people want to target him, you're like, whatever, if that's what the majority wants?
Once he got it open and there was, you know, the whole question of like, was there an advantage in there? And it just, it made him an easy target. And I was pushing that agenda because I was like, I don't need somebody with an advantage here. Like, let's get rid of that potential problem.
Something else you also have at the beginning of the game is you learn that you're starting with 1/3 of a hidden immediate idol, which is awesome. But you have a 1/3, everyone has 1/3, and you have to combine your beads in the string essentially to have a fully functioning idol. What was your thought about this twist?
It was interesting. And it also kind of gave me a little bit of peace of mind of knowing that there could potentially be 3 fully, you know, put together idols from each tribe, that it was likely there were not other idols out there. So while I did look slightly here and there, I didn't spend a lot of time feeling like I had to dig around or look in, you know, potential snake holes for for idols. So I just, you know, spent my time investing in my relationships and not really idol hunting. Also knowing that on day 1, from the start, I had this core group of 4 that I knew that gave us power to form an idol just between the 4 of us. And I felt that like I could trust that we would do that if we needed to. And we did, and it worked.
How was that first night for you?
The first night was cold. Even though I was better prepared, it was still cold, but we did a good job of like keeping our fire going, and it was, everything you expect when you're sleeping on the ground with no tent and
I've been there. It's not great.
Meager supplies.
So over the course of the second day, you're going to be really back and forth with the Porpoise tribe, the Kanana tribe. You're going to win 2 reward challenges. They're going to win 2 reward challenges. How are you feeling about your game and your tribe at this point in time?
It was like kudos to production for casting such a well-balanced cast and like splitting the tribes so evenly. I was like, wow, this is going to make great TV. But then also it gives you, that anxiety of like, oh, if this is happening now during the reward challenges, it's likely to happen once we get to immunity challenges. And you start going, I don't want to go to every other tribal. But that's kind of how it worked out.
You mentioned you have this core 4 that you're feeling good about at this point in the game. Talk to me about the other 5 players. Are you focusing on any relationships with them as kind of backups, or just or like, are there any people you're working on in particular?
I was talking to everybody a little bit, wanted to make sure that I had at least a base of a relationship with everybody in the tribe. I didn't talk as much with Colby and not a whole lot with Juan until a little bit later in the game. But I felt like I had at least some sort of relationship set up with everybody. I felt like I had a pretty good working relationship with Jay West until we got to, the night before we had to go to tribal, which we'll get to.
Yeah. I'm curious, could you rank the players in your tribe from most to least importance of your game? This is right before that first immunity challenge.
Sure. Allison's number 1. Then you have Allie, Chad. Then I would say probably, Deb and Jay West right there. Juan and Colby at the bottom. Sorry, Colby.
Where's Andrew?
Oh, Andrew! Poor Andrew. Sorry, Andrew. Andrew would probably be like right around the same area as Juan.
Okay. So it kind of is like you've tiers. You have the Deborah J. West tier, the Juan and Andrew tier, then the Kobe tier.
Yes.
Were you hearing any names, or were you throwing out names prior to that first immunity challenge?
Prior to it, no. I mean, Colby was on my radar because of the whole codex thing, and that does he have an advantage? So he was on my radar. I may have said his name at some point. I was like somebody we need to keep our eye on, but I didn't want to like throw out a name until we absolutely had to.
Mm-hmm. So you have that first immunity challenge, right? So this is where you're going to carry someone on a stretcher. There will be a balancing of ball across plates. There's a puzzle at the very end. Talk me through your role in this challenge.
Oh, gosh. I really thought that I would do much better at the part that I did than I thought I would. So I had the paddle that I had to balance the cue ball on. Walking up even a slight incline, which is exactly what I was doing with that, proved much more difficult than I thought, because I know Deb was the other person doing that part, and she seemed really concerned about doing it. So I said, it seemed like the first section, which was the slight incline uphill, was a little bit longer, and it was an incline uphill. So I said, oh, I'll take that part. So you have the shorter area, no problem. And then I kept dropping the ball. And I was like, oh my Lord, we came into this part with a lead and now I'm freaking blowing it.
Mhm.
It was like my worst nightmare, which I think just like added to the shaking. Finally, I got through it. Thank God. But I don't feel great about it, but I survived thanks to my connections in my alliance.
Yeah, so your tribe loses this challenge. How much are you scrambling when you get back to camp saying, I need to make sure my name's not out there? I'm worried are you worried people are going to throw your name out because of that performance, or you don't really have much to worry about? How does it go?
Honestly, I had some trepidation and I did think my name would be out there, but I honestly trusted in my core four and the relationships that I had with folks like Jay West, that I wasn't necessarily going to be the first one on the chopping block.
So were you actively pushing for Kobe, or just kind of letting other people say names and kind of rolling with it?
I did push for Colby because I said he seemed like he was going to be a chaotic player. We didn't know if he had an advantage. If he did have an advantage, we wanted to, try and flush that out of the game. As we know now, there was no advantage. It was just candy, but it made him kind of an easy target.
So talk to me about that night too, because a lot of that's going to flip the vote in a lot of ways.
Yes. So, we got back to camp. We knew that we weren't going to tribal until the next morning, but there was a lot of talk, lots of scrambling. And when we went to bed, I truly and firmly believe, and I think most people will back this up, that it was going to be between Colby and Deb for that first vote. And sometime in the middle of the night, my guess is like 3:00 in the morning, I wake up. Oh, wow. Yeah, you got the popcorn. I know. So around 3:00 in the morning, I wake up. Juan is not there. Jay West is not there. Maybe Colby isn't there. And I was like, okay, what's going on? So I sit up. Jay West comes over and he's in my ear and he's like, Chad came to me. He said that Juan said that Deb said that she's okay going home. So we're going to vote for Deb. And I thought, like the plan was Colby. And I was like, time out. I know that Bra would never say she was okay going home. That lady is tough as nails. She was never going to give up. She was never going to throw in the towel. I was like, there's no way that Deb said she was okay with going home. So I get up and I start touching base with my core four. I talked to Chad. I talked to, Allie. I talked to Allison. And I was like, guys, Jay West is spinning these webs of all this going on, saying now it's shifting to Deb, like what's going on. And finally I just look at them and I was like, wait, I know that we were like trying to rope in Jay West as our fifth person, but I don't feel like he's somebody who we're going to be able to trust if he's trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, like for the first vote when we went to bed with a solid plan. I was like, I can't deal with this chaos. So the demise of Jay West was born at, I don't know, 3:30 in the morning.
And so you the four of you who are deciding to vote in Jay West, you need to have a majority. Who do you bring in for that vote, and why?
We brought in Deb because we were able to tell her, hey, this is what they're saying about you. They're saying that you said that you were okay going home. Obviously, that wasn't true. And we're like, we want you here. We don't want to do, we don't want to vote you out right now. Well, we didn't say right now. We said, we don't want to vote you out. We want you here. Work with us on this vote. And she did.
So is a 5-4 vote, your dream first vote for a tribe, or do you wish you had, or was there a desire to bring in more people, but just the fear of an idol being played?
I wish that we could have, brought in Juan, brought in Andrew on it, but we didn't know how close they were with Jay West, if they would have said something to Jay West or given them his beads or their beads to form an idol. So we said, we have the numbers. This is what we're going to go with, because we don't want any, funny business in the first vote.
Aliana is stopping by and says hello as well.
Hi, baby.
So you have the first tribal council, and Jay West is blindsided, and with 5 votes to 4 votes to Deborah. What's the follow after this? What's the follow after this tribal council for you?
I feel like we had to have some conversations with Juan and with Andrew, in particular, to say like, hey, we wish that we could have looped you in on this, but we weren't sure if you would give Jay West beads, if you would let him know what was going on. And they were like, oh yeah, we understand. Now Juan was like, Jess, you heard me tell Jay West, shut the heck up. So you should have known that I would have been okay with that. And I was like, maybe, I don't know, because at that point he and I hadn't had a lot of chance to talk one-on-one. So I was like, I'm not sure. And our relationship improved after that, I feel.
So you have your next immunity challenge, Hot Pursuit. You're going to win that, and then you get your third immunity challenge. This is the challenge where you're going to toss the beanbags onto the floating platform and do some stuff afterwards. This does not go well for your tribe.
That was a hard challenge. Yeah, I was never a sports person, so the throwing and catching and of things has never been my deal. So yeah, that was tricky. And it did not quite go the way we wanted it to, obviously. But just like all the challenges, it was close. They were all so close. Even if we didn't win, we were so close.
So you're going back to tribal council. Talk me through how the strategy period goes for you.
Oh, sugar. Who goes
this Deborah's going to get voted out 7-1. You're going.
This is when Deb gets voted out. That's right. Okay. Sorry. I should have kept some notes or something.
I have this open on the second screen right behind me, so I'm
awesome. Yes. That's what I thought it was Deb, but I was like, oh no. Literally, it feels like at night, every night we would sit down in camp and we would go through okay, what happened today? And we would struggle in the moment. But of course we weren't fed or sleeping very well. And now I'm fed and have slept and I still can't remember. So maybe it's just my memory. But anyway,
that's a month plus since your game at this point.
That's true. Okay. So at that point, Deb was trying to throw me under the bus, saying that, Jess is weaker in challenges than I am. And, it was a fair assessment because throwing things, not my strong suit. I'm good at other things. And I did, prove in other challenges that I'm good at other things. And, she always gave it her all. I was giving it my all too. She just was better at the throwing in that particular challenge. And thankfully, my strengths that I did show and having that core 4 alliance is what pulled me through. So even though I knew my name was out there, I still felt confident because of the numbers that I had and the strong alliance that I had, that I was going to be safe.
So it was pretty clear that you were her target.
Yes.
Is there a world where Deborah doesn't go home here?
Colby's name was out there again as well. But people were concerned about challenge strength because at that point, we weren't sure, will there be a swap? Well, what's going to happen? And we said, with his back and forth as the challenges were going, we said a lot of folks were worried about getting rid of Colby because of challenges.
And so with Deborah's throwing, because you did Deborah kind of pretty high in your tier list, right, below your other core 4 members. So when Deborah's throwing at your name, you're just like, well, I guess that's it. She has to go. Or
yeah. Yeah, which is sad because like I would have liked to, see Deb be able to stay longer in the game. I would have liked to work with her, but at that point it became apparent that I was not high on her list, and so it was time for her to go.
Were you concerned at all about a potential 4-4 deadlock? Like if one, Andrew and Kobe and Deborah come together, they could try to force Rock, say, hey, we don't want you all being the majority alliance of this tribe.
We thought that it was a possibility, and we did say, the 4 of us said we're willing to go to Rocks because we didn't think that Colby or Juan would be willing to go to Rocks. So we said, if it comes down to it, we will, and knowing that one of them would likely flip and not stick with that and not go to Rocks.
So Deborah goes out. You catch your first vote of the season. Actually, I'm gonna check the stats real first. You do tie for the record of the season for most votes received, if that makes you feel better. Granted, it's a 3-way tie between you, Aliana, and Deborah. For getting 11 votes total.
I'll take it,
So your next mini challenge, Sumo at Sea, your tribe will win. Who do you go up against in this challenge?
So in the first round, I went up against Nina, and I did not use the best strategy. I was more worried about leveraging my toes than I was thinking about like getting down low and lowering my center of gravity. So I put up a good fight. But like once you lose your balance and you're down, it's hard to get back up and have any kind of good positioning. So I did lose that first round. And then in the second round, I went against Geraldine, and I got a little smarter the second time. And I was like, I'm going to literally use the assets that I have, which is my strong legs and my booty. And I got down lower than she did. I started lower. And then when they said go, I pushed up and used all the force that I have and knocked her over, because I knew if I could get her down, then it's hard to get back up. So once I got her down, and then I just pushed her off. And then when we were in the water, I was like, I'm so sorry. Because like, I'm a mom, I'm a teacher. I'm not supposed to be like beating people up.
In the classroom, Jessica, should I be worried?
No. I will only sumo at sea with grown adults. But it was like, it did feel so great to win that point, and then ultimately, get the winning point for my tribe in that challenge. And in all honesty, like, I was terrified of that challenge. Like when they had everybody close their eyes and raise their hand, I was like I knew I wasn't going to sit out, because I knew this was like a pivotal challenge. Like we had to win this challenge to keep things as even as possible and with the tribes going forward. So I was like, there's no way I can sit out. But I was terrified about getting hurt. I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to be a medical evacuation. But that's like one of my biggest fears. I'm like, I'm going to hurt myself in some stupid way and get evacuated from the game. Like, I didn't want that to happen. So being absolutely terrified and then getting the winning point for my tribe was like one of my proudest moments of the game.
So I'm curious. So Trav is going to get voted out at this next tribal council. What was your reaction to seeing him go?
I wasn't totally surprised, as I know that he can be an agent of chaos in games. So that part of me was surprised because I know that he can be really strong in challenges, and knowing, how back and forth things were, I was, kind of surprised that they had voted him out in that capacity at that time. But for me, I was like, and at that point, I was kind of feeling like, I don't think we're really going to have a swap. And I I thought maybe it was kind of a good thing for my game, which hurts my heart to say. But it probably, like, I don't need to be tied to an agent of chaos in the game. I love you so much, Trav, but
So you were
it was probably good for me.
You were saying you were starting to suspect there wasn't going to be a swap. At what point were you starting to feel that way, or come to the conclusion, yeah, this is a no swap season? Because we're at end of day 3, 4 people have been voted out. There's 14 people left.
It was right around that time, because I was like, okay, if it didn't happen at 15 and go to like 3 tribes of 5, and if it didn't happen at 14, I don't think it's going to happen, because I didn't think it would be worth it to, just swap for maybe 2 votes. So it was right around that time that I thought that a swap probably wasn't going to happen.
So day 4, you have an individual immunity challenge because both tribes are in the tribal council. Chad is going to win for your tribe. Ultimately, Kobe is going to go out here and he's going to be pushing your name hard. But how does the strategy for this round go for you? Is it clear cut or not?
For me, it was clearly cut Colby. The only time that I started to get a little bit nervous is when Allie asked for the beads back, because that is the round when Chad, and I guess he was feeling emboldened by the necklace, but also, yeah, Chad's just a gambler, and he's out there, and he's doing things that I'm like, ooh, I don't have the cojones to do that. But he convinced everybody to give him the beads, in this whole ploy of like, it'll help, retain the bead of whoever's going out for like the betterment of the tribe down the line. And I was like, hey, if people are buying what you're selling, sure. And, when I didn't want to be the first one to say like, oh yeah, but I knew that I was going to say yes, because I was like, this can only benefit me moving forward. So Allie said yes, Allison said yes. I was like, oh yeah, I could be on board with that. And then like, it was hard for other people to say no, because the momentum was already there. And at that point, people I think were probably starting to suss out our core 4, but I don't think that it was like totally out there, like in people's faces necessarily.
Jay West was kind of telling everyone there's this alliance that they want me to be in, but I don't want to be in. So do you feel like your alliance was a little bit more hidden even with that?
I think Jay West said a lot of things that people didn't always like necessarily listen to everything that he was saying, and he had been gone for a little while at that point. So yes, we may have been on people's radar, but I don't think that people necessarily knew that the 4 of us were as close as we were at that point.
Jay West said, yeah, they ain't taking me serious.
Sorry.
So with Kobe going out here, you just have Juan and Andrew kind of outside of your alliance. You mentioned before that your rapport with Juan had been improving over time.
Yeah, I felt like as time moved on, I started to have, more conversations with him, and starting to build that trust with him as the game moved on, and as I saw how he could be, a part of my game and a number for our alliance.
So Kobe goes out here, you catch your second vote of the season. Brandon, Nina will go out another tribe. You then have your outcast challenge. You're competing against the 6 people voted out, but you win. So and both tribes win. So no one's coming back in the game. At what point do you think the merge was going to be?
We ran every scenario of like when it could be. And at that point, like while we were running different scenarios, we kind of figured that it would be right when it ended up being with an outcast coming in from like an individual challenge amongst them, not against us.
So you have another tribal immunity challenge. This is the one where there's the vertical and horizontal ball mazes, which does not go well for your tribe. And you're going back to tribal council. Tell me what happens from here.
And it's a real bummer that turned out the way it did, because otherwise that would have been one of my favorite challenges of the season, because we were on it with that like table maze. We had a system down. We were going through it, and they got lucky. And that's, that one of many opportunities that you can see in these games. Luck is a factor, because they kind of got like a lucky hole in one on that snake puzzle. And then, they went through the table maze really quickly. And on our first 2 times going through that table maze, we did not drop at all. And it wasn't until we were rushed, and that's the first time that we dropped. And then it was seconds. Oh, that was heart-wrenching. So at that point, Juan's name was out there. People were not sure. We were weighing between Juan and Andrew. And we said, okay, going into a merge situation, we felt like Juan is more game savvy. He's going to be more of a gamer. He's been burned, and he would be more likely to jump ship and go to the other side, where Andrew, we felt, would be probably more loyal to the, initial Anata tribe. We felt that he wasn't as game savvy. He's only watched a few seasons of Survivor. He was telling us, his favorite player was Rupert, and I was like, loyalty, yeah. So we were weighing those, and in terms of like who was going to benefit us more in the long run, we thought it would be best to keep Andrew around. What we didn't take into account is that, the Juan and Andrew relationship, and Andrew then like giving his bead to Juan, and then in kind of like a act of loyalty and self-sacrifice, he kind of lays on the sword, and Andrew ends up going out, sadly.
Yeah, so talk about the discovery because Andrew ends up telling someone on your alliance that he gave his bead to Juan.
Yes. Yeah, like as we were walking into tribal, I'm not sure if he told Allison or Allie, one of the two. And that's when we realized that we were going to have to split the votes. We had a lot of bold and spicy tribals. And this one did not disappoint either. This was a live tribal, and we're like, okay, we need to split this vote, because we didn't know if Juan would play the idol, if he actually did have a full idol. And sadly, the other votes had to go on Andrew. And I love Juan, but he was more scary. He was more dangerous in the long term. So that's that. We put the majority of the votes on Juan. Juan ended up playing his idol, and Andrew ended up leaving.
So it ends up being a 3-2-1. 3 votes on Juan don't count. 2 votes on Andrew, 1 vote on Chad, and Andrew goes out. You have one more individual tribal immunity challenge this day. That ends day 4. Day 5, you have your last tribal immunity challenge. You're going to win this challenge, which is great, but were you tempted to throw this challenge at all?
Allie had mentioned, we should throw it. I don't have it anywhere in the capacity as a human being to throw a challenge. I just can't. I feel like it's like bad survivor juju. Like, don't do it. So I was never going to be on board with throwing a challenge. People kind of raised their eyebrows a little bit, like, oh, maybe. But then ultimately, I was like, there's no way. And I think the general consensus was like, no, we need to try our best and win it. And that was a very emotional win.
I'm curious, what was your relationship with Juan like after this travel council, where you do not vote for him, you do vote for Andrew, right? So
I did vote for Andrew, yes.
Do you have to repair anything with them, or is he just mad at all of you?
With Juan?
Yeah.
He was mad with all of us. But when I think this was probably like a turning point for Juan and I, because I said, hey, I did vote for Andrew, but also I explained to him like what our thinking was, and I was like, game respects game, and I think he kind of got that.
Mhm.
So I don't think we were going to ever like 100% trust each other, but I do feel like that probably, made things better between he and I.
So at this point, you're about to have the merge, the battle back. But I'm curious. So you're in this alliance of 4. You, Allison, Eliana, Chad. How do you feel within this alliance of 4?
I felt good. I don't know that I ever really thought about like a hierarchy within it. I felt totally solid with Allison. Like, to me, if I had to put, numbers on it, it would have been, like Allison, Allie, and then Chad. As like if we had to sacrifice one, Chad would have been the one that I would have been willing to sacrifice, and I think that Allie and Allison might kind of concur with that. Maybe at the time, I'm not sure what they would say now. I haven't had a chance to watch everybody's interviews, but it like we were very honestly like very pro, like, even though at times like you do have to vote for women. I wanted to see our women go the furthest. So it didn't get to the point where I ever had to write Chad's name down, but there were times later in the game where I did say I would be willing to if I had to when push came to shove.
So you would have felt okay if you end up Final 4 with those 3 other people then?
Yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, you're not going to have the opportunity to do so. Your alliance will be targeted a lot in the merge, which we'll start talking about. But let's begin with the battle back. 1 player is re-entering the game. Who did you want or not want to see come back in?
Ideally, I would have loved to see Andrew come back because, like I said before, I feel like he would have been kind of a loyal number. And I don't know that he would have been somebody who would have, jumped to the purple side and said like, hey, these guys voted me out. I think we would have been able to have conversations and said to him like, hey, we didn't want to vote you out. This is what happened. And I think that would have been,
you out.
yeah. Juan idled you out, come with us. So I think that would have been an easy sell, maybe. I honestly, anybody from initial Anata, I would have been happy to see back. I didn't want to see a purple come back simply because it put the numbers in purple's favor.
What was your plan coming to the merge? How did you want to approach it? Did you have any strategies in mind, or were you kind of like, let's just see play by ear what's going on with the other tribe?
I wanted to go in and play the middle as best that I could, which was tricky with no swaps because we had no base of relationship with these people, and now we are, going head to head, one 1v1 against each other. So it was hard to build those relationships when you're in the individual portion of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I had recognized Brandon. It turns out that he and I have similar, we've played similar online games, and we were kind of like in the same community of people, and we've actually been like, I have a picture with him in Orlando in like a big group picture, and I was like, oh look, there's Brandon, and here I am. But like we never actually like were introduced to each other. So I was like, oh, you know this person. So we have like mutual friends and kind of are in a similar community with each other. And he and I had randomly like eaten dinner next to each other the night before the game. We must have both been staying in the same hotel, and then like went to dinner at the same place. And like he sat like 2 seats over at the bar from me. So I was like, oh, hey, you know. And he and I, during the tribal portion of the game, had ended up kind of standing near each other a couple times and just saying like, oh, hey, and like had realized the connections that we had through Vanquish. And just said things about like, oh, he's a dad and I'm a mom. And I was like, oh, he felt like somebody I could connect with. Of course, Lachey was still over there. And I was like, okay, this will be a good time for me to reconnect with Lachey, see who Lachey's with. And I just wanted to kind of like feel out what the relationships were and kind of put myself in the middle of that as best I could and be like, hey, I have these numbers over here. What are your numbers over there? Let's come together and find a common enemy.
How was the merge feast?
The merge feast was glorious. I honestly like, I wasn't super hungry in the game. I think just because I was drinking water like it was my job, because I was like, I will not get dehydrated. I will not get dehydrated. But then, sometimes when you eat, then you're like, oh, I didn't realize how hungry I was. But I was like, okay, take it slow. You don't want to end up sick. But it was great. And the OG Anadas, we were strategic with a lot of stuff, and we talked about a strategy, when we came and we said, okay, we think this is going to be merge. At merge feast, don't sit next to each other. Stagger yourself between the Kanane people, and that's exactly what we did. We like made sure, and I was like, okay, and we each said like who we were going to sit next to, and I said, oh, I'm going to sit next to Brandon. I'm going to and I think that's who I ended up sitting next. I think I did sit next to Brandon. I don't know. I'd have to look at a picture or something. But we said that we were going to stagger ourselves so we could talk to different people and kind of get a feel for the group.
So you're going to have pretty much the majority of day 5 in this new merge tribe. There's going to be no vote outs that day. You'll have a mini challenge. Chad will win. I just want to kind of see what your interactions with some of the players are like. Let's talk with Lachey. As you mentioned, you play with her for Outlast. She saved you with an idol. You then have the voter out. She's been on the other side for the entire time. Someone who you like to reconnect with. How was reconnecting with her?
It was great to see Lachey and to talk with her. And she told me that she was tight with Isaiah. And I was getting, good vibes from Isaiah. Isaiah came to me and he was like, hey, Lachey has good things to say about you. So that made me feel good, because that was kind of like an unprompted thing. And I was like, okay, good. She's saying good things, because when we weren't together, that whole pre-merge, I didn't know what she was saying. If she was like, oh, this girl voted me out. Like, I didn't know what she was saying. Or if she had even mentioned that we had played, I didn't know what the Purple Tribe knew about my relationship.
Were you upfront about playing Outlast, or did you kind of not mention it, or just say this is your first game?
I did not say it was my first game. I did say that I had played a game previously. I didn't specify that it was Outlast until maybe day 3. And I did not tell everybody that I knew Lachey, or I never told anyone that I knew Allison, because we hadn't played together. So even if they had seen my season of Outlast, they wouldn't necessarily connect connect those dots between Allison and I. And it wasn't, and I did that very like low key, like I mentioned to Allie, when I felt like merge was coming, I was like, hey, so and I said to Allie and said to Chad, each individually, I was like, hey, so I did play Outlast with Lachey, but I said I had to end up voting her out, so I'm not sure that she's gonna want to work with me. So I really tried to downplay it, though. Going into merge, I was hoping that she and I could connect and unite forces, and sadly it did not work out that way.
Could there have been a world where you, Lachey, and Isaiah worked together, or that was just like you were just on two polar sides of the game?
I would have loved for that to happen. I think that would have been better for my game than what ended up happening. But at that point, I knew that obviously, like, my name was out there during that first merge vote, and I didn't want to then become the target. And I said, hey, if I'm pushing too hard for like, oh no, we have to keep Lachey around, then I felt like that was going to lose trust with my alliance and with the people that I had relationships with from the pre-merge of the game. So I didn't push it too hard because I thought that would be shooting myself in the foot. And I didn't know, because we didn't have any swap and we didn't have any time to play together before merge, I wasn't sure if Lachey would actually be invested in that or not. I hoped that she would. So when everybody was pushing Isaiah, and I was like, okay, that's great. Like, it's not Lachey. It is somebody Lachey's connected to, but it's not Lachey. And then it got switched to Lachey. And the only thing I said, I looked at Chad and I said, I cannot write Lachey's name down this time. And I did not. That's when I voted for Isaiah, or Isa, as I put down, because my brain literally shut off in the voting booth. And I was like,
how do you spell his name?
Isah. I couldn't remember that there was a second I in Isaiah. This is what happens to your brain, friends, when you're in the middle of an LRG and you haven't really eaten, and
well, I mean,
you're sleeping.
You can go around asking people, how do you spell your name? Like, we'll talk about the biggest red flag ever if someone comes up to you and asks you that.
How do you spell your name? Now, I mean, like, Isaiah is a name that I should know how to spell, but literally, like, sometimes your brain just glitches, and that was a time when it glitched. And it was sort of comical.
You kind of talked to Brandon, how you kind of moved in the same org circles in the past. You're on the same tribe with them. I'm interested because, like, it feels like did you two try to make something happen, or like what was going on with them?
We had casual chit chat. Like, I think we were both trying to like put out the little fishing line, seeing if we could reel something in. But at that point,
it was just us versus them.
It just wasn't happening. He wasn't really giving anything. I wasn't giving anything. So it just didn't work out.
And talking about Nina, Nina's the one that comes back in the game. You would think that she would be the most likely purple to want to work with orange.
That was the hope. And it did, work out for that one vote where we pulled the women together. But she did a great job of being adaptable and jumping when it worked, zigging and zagging when it worked best for her game. She did a really, really good job of navigating that. Much to my chagrin.
What was your relationship with her like in the game?
Not a whole lot. It was really hard not having a swap, and not being able to build any base of relationship with the whole other half of the cast until we were on the individual portion of the game, because you never got to build that like team camaraderie of like, yeah, we won that challenge together, or like we spent this night together. Like, we weren't spending a night together in the wilderness until it was every man for themselves. And at that point, production was like, hey guys, inclement weather's coming in, and we were all like, oh man, we need to get ready, batten down the hatches in case it starts raining. So it was hard to form those relationships. And at that point, yeah, I didn't get to form like the greatest in-game relationship with Nina, though I think she's a super neat chick, and I've had good conversations with her, like once we were on jury together and everything. But yeah, we didn't really have a very strong bond in the game.
So at what point is it apparent, all right, it's purple versus orange, and we need to play an idol?
Yeah, when we came back, and it's just the way that the numbers were going, we said, like, who is the middlest person, as Dwight and Allison would say, who is the middlest person? And I knew in my gut, I felt in my gut before Allison got any intel from Nina. I knew in my gut, and I said to my core four, I said, it's me. They're going to vote for me. I am the most middle person. And that's what it ended up true. And then like those suspicions were confirmed by Nina. So thank you, Nina. That did help. But I knew in my gut, and I did say to my core four before any of that intel was collected via Allison, that it was, yes, thank you.
I did. You can say that.
Yes, I knew in my gut, like my gut told me, I was like, it's me. I know, like you just know. And I trust my gut. I trust my intuition. And then, of course, like that, Allison got the intel from Nina. That was confirmed. I got the beads that I needed, and I said, like this is what has to happen, and save myself with the glorious idol.
How did it feel to play it?
Awesome. It always feels good to get an idol, using an idol properly. I did it in Outlast. I did it here. Like you don't like to see your name on the parchment unless it's to be the winner. But whenever you hear, just does not count, you feel like a little bit of Kelly Wentworth vibes, and it's like, okay, all right, like it's kind of a rush.
So the good news is you negate 5 votes. You negate the majority of votes. It is a correct idol play. Brandon will play an idol for himself and negate no votes. The downside is, Lachey goes out. You don't vote for her, you vote for Isaiah, but Lachey ends up going out with 3 votes, who is a person that maybe you had wanted to see later in the game for your own benefit.
Yeah, I think at that point I would have preferred to see, Rob go or Brandon go, because I wasn't really feeling the inroads with them at that point. But yeah, Isaiah was somebody who, like I said, he had come to me and said, hey, I heard really good things about you from Lachey. And, obviously I wanted to try to work with Lachey and navigate with our combined numbers. And it just didn't work out that way.
Yeah. So I'm curious, talk to me about Rob. What were your interactions or relationship in the game with him like? Especially because he's going to go on and win the game. So I'm curious where you fell in your game.
He was like a tough cookie to crack, or tough nut to crack. I like that first night of the merge, I was like hoping to have conversations with people. And like I said, we were kind of battening down the hatches because we were told inclement weather was coming. And he was literally the first person to like climb in to the shelter and lay down, and was like clearly like not going to have conversations with people. And I wanted no parts of sleeping on that wood, which I don't know if sleeping in that shelter would have gained me any inroads with anybody or not. But I did not want to sleep on that wood. I would have much rather slept on the ground, which is what I did. I was like,
marginally softer.
Yeah, exactly. I was like marginally softer. Yeah. So Chad, Juan, and I slept on the ground, and then at some point, I think Allison came over and joined us, and it probably was not the greatest thing for some hooves to be kind of like sequestered over there, but there didn't look like there was space on that wood. The wood did not look comfortable. Yeah. So, but circling back to Rob, he and I would have, conversations here and there. I had the feeling that he was on the bottom, which he does, convey, that was the truth later on. So I tried to like say, hey, we have these numbers, you could come vote with us, but he just was never he never gave me a whole lot. And I think, as I did watch his deep dive, he did see me as a threat to his game. So I don't think he was willing to give me a lot, because that wasn't a relationship that he was willing to invest in.
Mhm.
But I think he's a neat guy. I like him now.
So after Lachey goes out, Isaiah's going to win the next mini challenge. This is where you're kind of swirling the ball in the circle, and all eyes are on your tribe. Talk to me about this round. How does it go for you?
So that's when we got the ladies together for a vote. We teamed up, Allie, Allison, and I teamed up with Nina and Geraldine, and kind of like a bartering chip, because there are two purples, 3 oranges. We were like, we kind of offered up Juan, because we threw out Brandon as a name. They weren't really willing to give up Brandon. They weren't willing to give up Rob. So we were like, they thought that would put them in a worse position to give up a purple. So we said, okay, how about Juan? And that's what happened. Sorry, Juan.
Do you think this is the best, looking back, was this the best person to target here for you?
No, I mean, ideally it would have been great to get out a purple at that point. Would have been great to get out Rob. Like, but we could not convince people to get rid of Rob. I'm like, it's the individual portion of the game. He's freaking Aquaman Goliath. Come on. And like, nobody wanted to get rid of him. So even though he was like on the bottom, he had, those individual relationships and people who weren't willing to get rid of him, even in the individual part of the game. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, ideally it would have been great to get rid of Rob at that point. But that they weren't willing to do it, and we had to maneuver the best we could. So yeah, it would have been great to keep Juan around. I think that probably would have benefited, me in the long run, but we just couldn't make anything else work at that point. And we were hoping that we could continue to move forward, like as a group of women, which didn't work out either. But
what do you think would have made that?
Hopes and dreams.
How do you think that group could have moved forward with each other outside just kind of just being a one vote thing like this was?
We would have had to rewind time and not had we voted out Isaiah when we voted out Lachey, when Lachey got voted out, because Allison and Allie had voted for Lachey, so there wasn't a whole lot of necessary credence in them saying, oh, we don't want to vote for a woman, but they had just voted for a woman. So that didn't hold a whole lot of water with Nina and Geraldine, rightfully so.
It's also, this is the time where, like, Aliana's being targeted, so taking out Juan was this great third option. It was like, hey, let's preserve our main alliance, jettison Juan, unfortunately, and be able to move forward and see what happens from there.
Yeah, because Allie's name was out there, and we're like, no, we are not willing to get rid of Allie, but can we give you Juan? It was kind of like a, the lesser loss.
At this point, your tribe alliance, you have 2 beats left, right? After you played your idol, was there any scrambling to try to get a third beat somehow?
Not on my end. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else was or not, but at that point, I had kind of said, oh, that's not part of the equation for my game anymore.
So Juan goes out in a 6-3-1 vote. We got to talk about this next challenge. This will be the gross food challenge. I think this is probably the most disappointed and upset I think I've seen you in the game is after this challenge. Can you talk me through this?
Yeah, I really thought I had this challenge in the bag. Because I'm like, I can get it down. I can get these things down. I can keep them down long enough for them to do the count. And then, if I need to run over in the field and get rid of it, that's fine. But I was like, I can get it down. That's fine. No problem. I really had myself convinced. I was like, I can do that. I had convinced myself like that was the challenge that I was going to win. And honestly, had it been 1 century egg and not 2, I've watched the footage. I was done with the first one first. I would have won had it only been 1 century egg, but production decided to torture us with 2. And because I was like, okay, the strategy here is like, don't chew, just swallow. I had taken a bite, I swallowed. I took the second half, just swallowed it. So it was all just, sorry, this is really gross. It was all just like sitting in my throat.
Yeah.
And then when I got to the second one, I bit and I swallowed, and it was that second half of the second egg, and the middle was like slime that tasted like garbage smells. And just getting down that second half of the second egg was the part that killed me, because I was trying so hard not to chew it and just swallow it. And that's when I did not win. It was very sad. Yeah, it was very disheartening, because I was like so convinced. I was like, I can do this.
But you can. You did. Just
I did.
Half a second slower than Rob.
I know. It was very hard.
Do you think what would have changed had you had immunity this round, do you think?
Who ended up going out here? Remind me.
So Aliana's gonna go out in a 6-3 vote. You're gonna vote for Brandon.
Okay. I mean, maybe I would have been able to get a little more leverage. I don't know. I feel like there's just a little bit of, you get a little extra leverage when you have that necklace on. In my head, I believe that. I haven't had that happen yet. The next game I play, I'll tell you, because, I'm working really hard. Next game, I'll be like, look at this. But in my head, I think like there's just something that gives you a little extra leverage when you're wearing that necklace. I don't know, people listen a little bit more maybe. So maybe we would have been able to get that leverage to get rid of Brandon at that point. Or maybe finally get rid of Rob. But that was very, very sad.
So talk to me about the strategy this round then. Trying to push for Brandon, trying to save Aliana.
We were trying to talk to the ladies, because we had, just previously worked with the ladies. We were trying to keep the ladies together and say like, hey, we worked together on this last vote. We gave you an orange. Now it's time for you to give us a purple. And because Nina was playing the middle so well, that wasn't going to be the best for her. And as it proved, later on in the game, it was better for her to keep Brandon around, because it, then helped her longevity in the game. But yeah, it was really, we were really trying to leverage the women to stick with that. And it didn't work out.
Why not target Isaiah here? Why target Brandon?
I don't know. I don't remember, to be honest. I think it must have felt like Brandon, I don't know. I don't know if we thought that Brandon had less connections possibly with Nina and Geraldine. I honestly don't remember, but that sounds rational to me. Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm not 100% sure.
So Aliana goes out, but was Aliana the ideal person that would have been better for your game if Chad or Allison had been voted out here over Aliana?
For my game, if it had been Chad, it probably would have been better for my game. But I know that Allison really was a champion for me, later on in the game as well. So, which I'm not sure. I mean, Chad and I were aligned, but I don't know that he would have gone to bat as much for me as Allison did. So, if I had to swap out one of those people, I would have swapped out for it to be Chad.
And Aliana maybe would have just been a bigger target also down the line too, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so.
So, how are you feeling at this point in time? Your tribe, you're down the numbers. Your alliance, you're down to 3. There's still 5 purples left. Are you kind of like panicking, or just like there's a way I just need to find there's a way, I just need to find it?
I felt like, there was a way. It was going to be an uphill battle. And that's when I really felt like even more pressure, like, oh, I really need to try to win immunity, because we're clearly in danger here, and it's going to be harder to make those inroads. I thought there were possibilities out there, but I knew it was going to be an uphill battle. I felt like I could still possibly, leverage saying to people like, oh, Chad would be a better person to get out instead of me. And, I'd be willing, I'm open. And I said that a lot at this point of the game, like, hey, I'm open, keep me around. Like, you're going to be more likely to, to beat me. Like I try, but it didn't work out that way.
Talking about Geraldine, we haven't really spoken much about her. What was your relationship with her like in the game?
She's another one who I did not really connect with, and I'm going to be 100% honest. That first night that we merged, she was very vocal in terms of like, well, because we went to the purple camp was our merge camp, so it was like their home turf, and we were coming into it, and she was like, well, we put this here and we do this way. And I looked at Juan at one point and I was like, I need to stay over here, or I'm going to say something that's not going to be good for my game. Like, I didn't, I was like, my bold and spicy and tangy side was going to come out, and I didn't want to do that. So I bit my tongue, and I went and I slept on the ground away from the group. Another person who, like, I got to talk to her once we were on jury and have had, positive interactions. Yes.
Aliana confirming.
Yeah, that first night especially, it was like, yeah, we do things this way, and this is where we put this. And I was like, not like, welcome. And I think, like, in her mind, she was probably trying to be helpful, but at that point, we were like 5 days into the game, and we were tired and we were hungry, and it was like, oh, okay, this is the individual portion of the game. And I was just like, I don't have the tolerance for this. I am usually a very, very patient person, but like, that's the point where my patience started to wane a little bit. And so, yeah, I looked at one and I was like, I'm going to go over here so I don't say something I regret. And yeah, like I said, have now after the game had, lovely conversations with Geraldine, but in the game, we didn't have much of a relationship. There were, once we got to this point where we had the vote where we worked with the ladies, I was really trying to convince her, like, hey, continue to work with the ladies. This will help gain you more agency in the game. And I was trying to like pump her up in that way, and she just wasn't buying what I was selling. But I really truly meant it. I thought that it would be good for her game. I thought it could mutually benefit both of us. And she just wasn't getting on board with it. So we were just never on the same page in the game.
So Rob is going to win a second mini challenge. This is the water challenge.
I was so close with that one too. If Isaiah hadn't helped him with the memory part of it, I would have beat him, but that's neither here nor there.
So how does this vote land on Isaiah?
How does this vote land on Isaiah? I think Isaiah had proven himself because, he had one individual immunity already at that point. He had come close with the eating challenge because the eating challenge, Rob, Isaiah, and myself were the final three in that. For this swimming and memory challenge, it was Rob, Isaiah, and myself in the final three of that. So he had proven himself as somebody who was dangerous. He was obviously very social and in with people. And once again, I think, we had thrown out Brandon as a name. We had thrown out Isaiah as a name. Isaiah is the name that seemed to pick up traction. And at that point, some of the purples seemed to be willing to get rid of Isaiah. And we said, okay, we'll run with that.
Mm-hmm. Did you know Geraldine was going to be left out of the vote?
I do believe that I knew that she was going to be left out of the vote. Because I think to Geraldine, I think we had said Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Because we felt that Geraldine was closer with Isaiah than other people from Original Purple.
So Isaiah's going to be blindsided here, going out in a 6-2 vote. Chad will catch 2 votes. And this gets you to probably your least favorite round, the final 7 rounds. How are you feeling at final 7?
Vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I was begging people to let me have one more night in the woods, please. We had done so many challenges and so many tribals that day. After the Isaiah vote, I was like, oh, good. We're going to go back. Like, it's going to be at the end of the night. I'm going to see day 7. And then we got another tree mail. And I was like, shit. Like, I just knew it in the pit of my stomach. I was like, if I don't win this, I'm so vulnerable. And at that point, that's when I was really, that's when I was saying to people, and I'd probably said it before, but I definitely said it at this point. I said, if you guys would be willing to vote Chad instead of me, like I'm open to that. But at that point, what I didn't know, but what I do know now is, like Chad and Rob had formed a relationship and all that was going down. So that wasn't really an option. But that's when I was really, at that point, I was like in self-preservation mode. And I was like, please, just let me have one more night. Chad's more dangerous than me. He's one individual immunity. I come up short every time. Vote for Chad instead of me. Of course, obviously, I would have liked to see somebody else go home, but if it has to be an orange, pick Chad, not me. And it didn't work out. So,
do you think, let's say the vote happens morning day 7? Do you think that would made a difference having that extra time?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would have, because then I could have had more productive conversations with people like Nina and Rob, because at that point, like Rob had picked me to go on the reward after the swimming and memory challenge. He had taken myself and Isaiah, and I like I said, we didn't get real deep in conversation, but I at least felt like I had a little bit of a base with him at that point. And I feel like had we had the night, I could have at least gotten in his ear a little bit and said, talk to him about how I could benefit his game. And it just, we didn't have the time. And we were literally like doing the most of our strategizing, just like in the field before the pathway where you walk into tribal, and it was dark, and I was like just walking up to people with, deer in headlights look like, just, keep me. And then, if I had more time, I think I could have possibly.
So at the immunity challenge, the beads, the idle pieces are out of play, but you learn there's the stamps. Like, you are willed stamps by players who are voted out pre-merge. You can step out of the challenge, and whoever has the most stamps gets some advantage. Chad declares he's going to step out. Were you tempted to as well?
No, I didn't feel like I had close enough relationships with the people who had been voted out at that point. Excuse me. I felt like my close relationship, the majority of my close relationships were still in the game. So I didn't think that that's something that that I was going to have the most votes for.
Going to tribal council, did you know that you were the main target?
No, not officially. It's like I kind of knew it in my heart, and but I didn't want to let myself believe it. So I wasn't blindsided, but I was still holding on to a shred of hope. Like, I did have a conversation with Rob right before we went into tribal, and he said, I want to work. He's like, I've said in every Survivor interview, application tape and all of these, things, I've always said that I want to align with the strong women. And he's like, you're a strong woman and I want to align with you. He's like, we could make a difference moving forward. And I put my shred of hope and credence in that. And he was just pulling the wool over my eyes as happens in these games. And, but I kind of knew in my heart that that's what was going to happen.
Because Allison goes up to bat for you and fights very hard for you not to be targeted this round, which you probably only got to see post-game in the videos.
Yeah, she did. And that's why she was my number one. Like, from the start, I was like, this is the girl. And I felt like we just would be there for each other throughout the whole game. And we absolutely were. And that means a whole lot. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling like emotional about it now. But yeah, and she really tried. And I think at that point it was just like we were going on hoping and wishing and trying to change people's minds, and it just, the numbers just were not in our favor at that point.
Especially when Chad reveals at tribal council his advantage is he's immune at that tribal council. It's a pretty good advantage.
Yeah. So, and I think, and that's why I couldn't push the numbers on to Chad, because he had that thing, and everybody was afraid of what he had. So yes, I forgot about that portion of it. So yeah, so knowing he had an advantage of some sort, and then it turns out he was immune. Yeah, I was screwed.
So you will end up getting 4 votes, so it'll be a 4-2-1. You'll vote for Brandon along with Allison. Chad will throw his vote on Geraldine, and you are voted out at the very end of day 6, which means you get to sleep in a bed that night, for better or worse. But it's not.
Or a piece of carpet, a piece of floor. Sleeping on the floor never felt so good. So there were only 2 beds in the jury room. The whole jury slept in the same room, and Juan and Lachey were the first 2 members of the jury, so they got the beds, and they were not sharing them or giving them up. So the rest of us promptly, filled in on the floor. We were just having a big old slumber party, but sleeping on the floor never felt so good. Just the fact that there was a blanket and, you know, some carpet underneath me, and I had a pillow, I still slept like a baby.
How was your reception to the jury house?
Everybody was great. Everybody was great. Honestly, everyone in the cast was lovely. I can't believe that, you know, there are 18 people in the cast and there's not one person that I'm like, oh, I don't need to talk to them again. Like, truly and honestly, I would be happy to see any of these folks in the future, socially, in a game. It would be great. So yeah, going in there, it was lovely. Everybody was very kind. I was very emotional. As you know, especially when I get tired,
Mm-hmm.
I'm an emotional person anyway. I'm a very much an open book, and my highs are very high and my lows are very low. And, you know, sometimes I cry because I'm happy, and sometimes I cry because I'm sad, and sometimes I cry just because that's, you know, the confusion is coming out through my eyes. So yeah, there were tears, there were laughs, there were smiles, but like it's still, I still feel good about my game. Of course, it wasn't the ending that I wanted, but being there and talking to people made me, you know, feel even more proud about what I accomplished in the game.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, are there any like coulda, shouldas, or things you're like, oh, if I had done something differently at this junction, that could have changed the direction of how pre-merge or merge could have gone for me?
I mean, like, you could always go back and say, you know, coulda, woulda, shoulda, this and that, but I don't know that there's one pivotal thing that I could have done much differently that would have had a tremendous difference in the trajectory of the game. There's always an element of luck in these games, and the elements that were completely out of my hand, like in terms of like who came back from the battle back, things like that, I had no hand in that. Had those things gone differently, I think my game could have gone differently, but I don't know that there's a specific thing that I could have done.
I would think the only key moment I can think of the merge would have been the merge vote, right? When Chad comes out and says, "We need to vote Lachey," right?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like, I mean, this was last minute, and kind of your group and the four of you just like were like, all right, we're running with it. It's too late now, and it sounds like he didn't get a lot of pushback at that moment when he switched things up.
Yeah, on it. Yeah, if I could have given had more agency in that vote and kept Lachey around, that probably, yeah, could have been a turning point in my game. But that's where the fear kind of creeps in, and I was like, and like I said, at that point I knew my name was out there, and I was like, I don't want to put a bigger target on my back or cause distrust with my people. So I wasn't willing to rock the boat that much at that point.
So I guess two things about being a juror. First, what did you learn as a juror that surprised you, as like from either the previous jurors or as people kind of entered the jury house?
Let's see. I guess when people came in and would say things like that Chad had mentioned my name at some point, that and whether that was true or not, that was really sad to me at that point. And then, you know, having talked to Chad after the fact and everything, like, I understand what was happening. And I don't think that Chad was ever like after me. Chad never voted for me. So that's not something. I did have questions about what Chad's advantage actually was, because the way that he read it and then like restated it sounded kind of fishy. So there were some questions about like, did his advantage actually say that he had immunity, or was it something that he could have used on me? The one regret that I was having that night in that moment and I didn't really get over it until I got to like see the paper for myself, was like, why didn't I ask him to read that paper? So like that, first night in the jury room, I was like, why didn't I ask him to read that paper? And then that it maybe would have made me feel a little bit better about like, okay, he really was immune. There's nothing I really could have done to push it on him or, whatever. But I lost my train of thought where I was going with that. Sorry.
I guess my other question is, what's your philosophy as a juror? What do you look for in a winner?
I wanted to, see somebody who played a strong game, who had a well-rounded game, and I'm always looking to see like, how did they navigate through this game and, hit those points out, like outwit, outplay, outlast, and, just be cognizant of, what are we all out here trying to do?
So when you get to the final three of Chad, Allison, and Rob, you do end up voting for Allison. Was Allison always your vote of those three, or would Chad and Allison final two, would that have been competition for Allison?
Had it been Chad and Allison in the final two, it would have been a much more difficult choice for me personally. Of course, I had seen both of their games and worked hand in hand with them the whole, until my demise. Rob, I didn't have a real clear understanding of what his game was. And so in my eyes, Allison made the right choice, picking Rob, because to me it was, home run. Allison's running away with this. So I was surprised by a lot of the votes, by the jury, to be honest.
So your question you asked is, how did you adapt your gameplay and how that adaptation gets to the final two? Did their answers change your decision at all?
No. And it actually made me consider Rob somewhat at that point, because he gave a very strong answer. He had to be very adaptable in the game, and I find adaptability to be a very, key point to these social strategy games. But he just, for me personally, he just didn't give me enough to change my mind. And honestly, like I was going into the final tribal with somewhat of an open mind, but it was going to take a whole lot for Rob to get my vote. And I know I'm usually somebody who likes a good underdog story of, like, oh, this person was playing from the bottom, but it was hard for me to see Rob as an underdog when he was so dominant physically. And he said he was on the bottom, but on the times when he was vulnerable, when, once we got to the merge, he didn't have immunity, even though he was on the bottom, people weren't willing to vote him out. So I don't believe that he was necessarily as on the bottom as he was portraying it to be. I'm not discounting, like, he played a great game as well. I just think he played a different game than Allison. And I think there's a lot to be said in terms of having a very strong social game like Allison had. Allison insulated herself from the start. And, I think that's just, I don't think it's a better or a worse strategy than fighting your way from the bottom. It's just a more emotionally charged strategy, and it's having a better maybe like read on people and read on your strengths in terms of social social adaptability and social bonds. And Allison never getting a vote against her, I think, shows that her social bonds, not only in the pre-merge, but also once we hit the merge, were strong. And not just for Reelfoot, but also for, just these LRGs in general and Survivor in general. Women aren't necessarily given the credit for their emotional intelligence and strength in those areas. I don't think they're given as much credence as, say, other things, which I brought up in the jury roundtable as well. So I still feel proud of my vote for Allison. I feel proud of Allison's game. I'm not discounting Rob's game. He just wasn't going to get my vote personally.
And you mentioned kind of being surprised with how the final vote outcome went.
I was surprised that Chad voted for Rob. I was not aware of the relationship that he and Rob had formed. And I really, I really thought that Chad would vote for Allison. After our jury roundtable, I thought that Isaiah might vote for, and not just our jury roundtable, but just discussions within the jury over, the time that I was in the jury room. Isaiah said many times he didn't really have a relationship with Rob, and that Rob was going to have to say, kind of X, Y, and Z certain things to gain his vote. And so I really thought that Isaiah could be a vote for Allison as well. I thought that Nina might be somebody who would vote for Allison, wanting to champion a female winner, but then also they had formed an alliance and were working together throughout the game. So I thought there were lots of possibilities of people who might vote for Allison. So I was surprised that the vote count wasn't closer.
How was the post-game party for you?
Oh, the post-game's been great. The post-game party was great. I did obviously, my heart hurt for Allison, and I know she went and spent a little time away from the group for a little while, because that's an emotionally rough thing, and then not really having an outlet, or so that was hard. But it was nice to see everybody all cleaned up, and we felt very, I don't know, official, going out in public and announcing the vote in that way. So that was fun.
And how has the past couple of weeks since the season been? I know you've done some traveling, but I guess, was this an easier post game for you than Outlast, perhaps?
No, this was much harder, physically and emotionally. Outlast is 4 days. Reelfoot is 8 days. I lasted almost till day 7. So just those extra days of fun. Yes. Just those extra days out there, without food, without great sleep. It took a lot longer for my body to accept food again. And just, I felt, I still have very close bonds with folks from Outlast. I talk to them all the time. But I don't know, there was just a very strong connection with this whole cast. Our group chat is still blowing up all the time, and our Anata tribe chat is always going. Talking to some folks individually, one-on-one. Allie and I are planning to meet up, and other folks, we're like, hey, I'm going to be here, are you going to be there? And just trying to figure out when we can be together again. I'll get to see Allison and Trav and Lachey in a couple weeks up at Outlast. We're all going to be helping with production for that. So just knowing that I get to see these folks again is really awesome. And we're talking about okay, I'm all right, who's gonna get an Anata snake tattoo with me? And Juan's I will. We're planning matching tattoos and shit. So it's it's been really, really great. I'm feeling more normal now, but like these people, they're stuck with me whether they like it or not. We are all part of this crazy Reelfoot family now, and like I'm freaking in love with them all. Also, like the whole production staff was like so supportive and kind and welcoming, and I'm like, can we all just like hang out in this house together for another week and just like play O'Rear's Crazy Minis? And like it was a really positive experience all around.
Is there anything else about your game or experience you want to talk about that we haven't had a chance to get into?
No, I'm just, even though like obviously the goal is always to win, and you know, I fell short of that. I still am very proud that I didn't get in my own way. I didn't get in my own head. I went out there and I made a number one, and I made a strong alliance that like persevered deep into the game. I feel proud of some of my challenge performances, others we won't talk about.
Very good individual challenge performances.
Yes, yeah, and well, there were some tribal challenges that, you know, like I got the winning point in sumo at sea, which I was terrified of sumo at sea. And there were, you know, just other, like when I was the caller for the cube challenge, when they were blindfolded and just, you know, people saying like, hey, we didn't even hear Isaiah's voice. He was the caller for purple. We only heard your voice. Like just feeling like I did a good job and I helped my tribe and I did well individually, even though that necklace was elusive. I'm still proud of myself. I feel like I checked a lot of boxes. I still have boxes to check. So, you know, I'm still looking to see what I'm gonna do next. But I'm very proud of myself.
I have a couple of quick wrap-up questions for you. Let's pretend next season Reelfoot they do another gross food challenge, and they're gonna have players eat a century egg. But my question to you is, how many century eggs should they make those players eat?
3, clearly.
Okay, so they up the ante a little bit more.
It just has to be one more every time, like until, and I don't know, Reelfoot 24, they're having a dozen century eggs. They can't go any less after this. You can't go backwards. That would just not be fair.
What survivor challenge would you want to have your students run?
Ooh, well, my students are little ones.
How old are they?
I teach first grade.
Okay. 6 is perfect for survivor challenges.
Yeah, well, let's sumo at sea, guys. Let's work out our differences on the playground. No, I think maybe some of the puzzle challenges would be, you know, we could do some survivor puzzles for indoor recess this year.
Are you going to share videos of your experiences with your students of these things you did, or this is not for them?
Oh, of course, yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you can go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice before you played Reelfoot, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, what would I tell myself? Bring water shoes, because I think I would have won both points in sumo at sea had I had water shoes instead of my Tivas, because I couldn't get any leverage with my toes. Or to use the better strategy of literally putting my ass into it for both rounds instead of just the second round.
Jay, what's the brilliant idea? You can have your students eat mayo. That is a very easy at-home challenge. Their parents will love it, I'm sure.
No, I have a no vomit clause in my classroom. Like, you're not allowed to throw up, and I don't want or poop your pants. So
you have 4 kids. You've seen enough. You have like no more, please.
No more.
Now in your out last season you had swaps. In this season you had no swaps. Do you prefer swaps or no swaps?
I don't know. Like, I kind of got swap screwed a bit in Outlast, even though I was able to overcome it in a very emotional way. I feel like if we had a swap, had I swapped with the numbers on my side, even if I hadn't swapped with the numbers on my side in Reelfoot, I think I would have been able to say like, oh, hey, I have Chad and Allison and Allie. Like, even if I wasn't swapped with them, I think I would have been able to use that alliance as leverage. And then being able to make those relationships with people at during a tribal level rather than an individual level. I think that could have benefited my game to have a swap.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite challenge this season?
Strangely enough, sumo at sea. I think because I overcame the fear and did it, and I felt really powerful, and that's not something that I get to say a whole lot in my life, but I felt really powerful, and it was great.
What was one of your favorite moments back at camp?
Favorite moments at camp? Oh, big booty, obviously. We just like all the like improv games that we played just to like entertain ourselves, and just I think it really helped grow our camaraderie and showed like we were the good vibes tribe, because like we would walk in to every challenge and we were like laughing and cutting up and going, oh, big booty, big booty, big booty, like cutting it up, and they were just much more like serious, and I don't know, maybe they were more focused, but it didn't equal winning every single time. It went back and forth. So sometimes the good vibes, worked in our favor. So yeah, just laughing and cutting it up and playing games were all the best memories.
Both your Outlast season and this season had a redemption component. Should every Survivor game have redemption in it?
For these LRGs, I think yes, absolutely. We're not playing for $1 million, and you're putting your own money out there to to play the game, to fly there, to stay in a hotel before or after. Like, yeah, let's give people another chance. While it kind of threw a wrench into my game, the way it worked out this time, like had I been voted out earlier, I would have wanted a chance to get back in the game. But like whenever Jeff Probst gives me the call and I'm out in Fiji, no, I don't want to redemption.
Fair. Who would you share the jar of candy with?
I would have given it away to whoever wanted it. Honestly, I'm not like a sugar candy person. Like, had it been a jar of chocolate, I would have been like, yes, I will take this, but I'm not like a sugar candy person. So whoever kind of raised their hand and wanted it, I would have said, have at it, go for it.
Who do you wish you had a chance to work with but didn't have an opportunity to do so?
I wish that I would have had the opportunity to work with Isaiah and Lachey. I think that could have been pivotal in my game had we been able to figure something out at the beginning of the merge there. Yeah.
And besides yourself, who would you like to see come back and play another season of Reelfoot?
I want to see Colby come back when he's like a few years older and get that unfinished business. Like he just, when he's not going to shoot himself in the foot by picking up a possibly public advantage.
Well, Jess, thank you so much for your time today. I'm really appreciating you spend this moment walking through your game and history, and I had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. It was great. I, love talking about these games, and I can't wait for whatever the next crazy adventure is going to be.
Well, it sounds like Outlast Production is the next crazy adventure, potentially.
That is. It's going to be so much fun. I'm going to be there. And Allison is the new host for Outlast this season. So I'm going to be her hype girl and helping out in any way that I can. And yeah, it's going to be good times up in Massachusetts. But also, I have to shout out to, applications just dropped for Reelfoot season 14. So if anybody out there is watching and you've been considering it, if I can do it, you can do it. If you're obsessed, like if you've been thinking about it, stop thinking about it and put in your application because it's awesome. And, hopefully I'll be there helping out on production next year, and I'll, get to watch you suffer in the best possible way of type 2 fun.
Boy, I mean, I love the description of type 2 fun because, like, I have friends who are like, you spend your vacations doing what? I'm like, yeah, it's great. I suffer, I come back, and work is awesome.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, if I could go for 6 days with 3 pinches of rice and sleeping with a rock as my pillow, then this is light work, right?
Managing first graders is way easier than managing a lion.
Way easier. Way easier.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. This has been another episode of the Live Reality Game Podcast. We've done a lot of interviews for First Fire, but there are still more to come. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central Time, I'll be talking to Janai. So get excited for that. And hopefully I'm going to be out for a vacation myself, and hopefully I'll be able to get kind of some of the stragglers this season who I've been slow about scheduling with, Isaiah and Sam and Deborah when I return. So get excited.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, everyone.